This is Tony T here from TonySpeaks.com with our college football pick show here for Saturday, October 18th. For more free pick videos, be sure to subscribe to our channel. We have lots of free picks over our channel delivered by myself as well as our team of cappers here at TonySpeaks.com. We have 3 live shows over our network as well, including mine at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. The chat's wide open so you guys interact with us in our live chat during the live show with your questions, comments, and picks as well. Give us a like and thumbs up. We greatly appreciate it. And then, of course, then visit our site, TonySpeaks.com. We're a multi-capper site showcasing top performers in our industry. Click the links to the hot cappers. Get signed up to long-term passes. Top performers up here like Sean Higgs, Rod, DeAndre, guys you know from our live shows, as well as our YouTube videos. Brian Baylor here has been red hot as well. Brian Palmer, you see him on our live shows as well. El Nino's a big day. Ramon up there. Justin, latest prefix here, send the page with best bets and more. We'll be locked and loaded for this card here on Saturday with our best bet tabs, our $19 promotional items we have up there for you as well, multi-packs, and of course now we sell props. So all profit guaranteed on the one-day passes. They must turn a profit. Amount purchase will be credited back to your account for site credits. That is profit guarantee. And then our promo code TonyT at checkout will knock off that 15%. The link's in the description to get signed up. So let's get this one underway. I got Arizona and Houston for Saturday. We've got Arizona falling to 4-2 after a 33-27 home defeat to BYU in overtime. Wildcats rushed for 184 yards for 4.8 yards a carry and were inefficient in the passing game. They surrendered 258 yards rushing to the Cougars with 5.1 yards a carry, along with 5.9 yards per pass attempt. Noah Fafita in the game, 25 of 45 passing for 219 yards with 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Houston now 5-1 after a 39-17 road win at Oklahoma State. The Cougars were effective through the air and rushed for 166 yards for 3.7 yards a carry. Houston limited the Cowboys' ground attack to 1.5 yards a carry with 180 passing yards for 9 yards per pass attempt. Connor Wegman in the game, 21 of 30 for 206 yards with 2 touchdowns along with a rushing score. Dating back to last season, the Wildcats have lost the past 3 road conference games by 21 points or greater. The Cougars have defended well at home. Holding teams to 3.3 yards a carry, 6.2 yards per pass attempt. Wildcats 0-4 the spread as road dog of plus 7 points or fewer. Houston 4-2 the spread as home favorite. Pick here Houston minus 2.5. Central Michigan and Bowling Green going off on Saturday. We got Central Michigan 3-3 after their 28-22 road defeat at Akron. The Chippewas rushed for 238 yards for 6 yards a carry, but inefficient in the passing game. They allowed 255 yards passing to the Zips for 8.2 yards a carry with 162 rushing yards for 4.4 yards per rush. Joe Labas in the game, 12-21 passing for 134 yards. Bowling Green now 3-3 after a 28-23 home victory against Toledo. The Falcons were held to under 2 yards per carry, but efficient in the passing the football. They allowed 3.8 yards a carry to the Rockets with 264 passing yards for 8.8 yards per pass attempt. Drew Pine missed the game due to injury. Lucian Anderson, 9 of 16 passing for 92 yards with 2 touchdowns and a pick. Chippewas have rushed for 4.5 yards a carry and got good quarterback play with 83% completion rate, 9.1 yards per pass attempt. Bowling Green is dealing with a banged-up starting quarterback. Their pass defense is allowing 8.7 yards per pass attempt. Pick here, Central Michigan, plus 5.5. Eastern Michigan and Miami, Ohio going off here on Saturday. We got Eastern Michigan 2-5 after a 16-10 home victory against Northern Illinois. The Eagles rushed for 149 yards for 3.9 yards a carry with inefficient passing. They limited Huskies' passing attack and allowed 218 yards rushing for 5.6 yards per rush. Noah Kim in the game, 19 of 32 passes for 147 yards with a touchdown and a pick. Miami, Ohio sits at 3-3 after a 20-7 road win at Akron. The Redhawks rushed for 3.6 yards a carry with movement in the passing game. They limited the Zips' run game and allowed 211 yards passing for 5.4 yards per pass attempt. Quan Finn in the game, 14 of 25 passing for 203 yards with a touchdown and pick. He rushed for 65 yards in the game. EMU has covered 4 of 5. They were competitive at Buffalo with a 1-point defeat. The Eagles have been good in pass defense against the MAC and rushing for 166 yards for 4.1 yards a carry. Miami, Ohio has dealt with issues with quarterback accuracy. Pick here Eastern Michigan plus 13.5. Baylor and TCU going off here on Saturday. Baylor now 4-2 after a 35-34 home victory against Kansas State. The Bears rushed for 3.9 yards a carry and were effective in the passing game. They allowed 162 yards rushing for 4.5 yards a carry with 339 yards passing for 7.4 yards per pass attempt. Sawyer Roberts in the game, 25 of 39 passing for 345 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. TCU 4-2 after a 41-28 road defeat to Kansas State. Horned Frogs rushed for 72 yards for 3.3 yards a carry and effective in the passing game. They allowed 3.2 yards per rush to the Wildcats with 198 yards passing for 7.6 yards per pass attempt. Josh Hoover in the game, 26 of 47 passing for 376 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks. TCU's losses have come on the road. Dating back to last year, the Bears have failed to cover 6 of 7. The Bears' defense has been poor on the road by allowing 36 points per game with 293 yards passing for 8.6 yards per pass attempt. TCU at home has defended the run well and getting great work from the quarterback with 338 yards passing for 9.7 yards per pass attempt. The Horned Frogs 4-0 to the spread at home on a road defeat. Pick here TCU -3. Washington and Michigan going off here on Saturday. All right, we've got Washington now 5-1 after a 38-19 home victory against Rutgers. The Huskies had a monster pass performance and rushed for 177 yards for 5.5 yards a carry. They allowed 4.1 yards per rush with 386 yards passing for 7.7 yards per pass attempt. Devin Williams here, 21 of 27 passes for 402 yards with 2 touchdowns. He rushed for 136 yards and 2 scores. Michigan drops to 4-2 after a 31-13 road defeat to USC. Wolverines rushed for only 3.5 yards a carry and moved the ball through the air. On defense, they surrendered 489 yards to the Trojans with poor work against the run and pass. Bryce Underwood here, 15 of 24 passing for 207 yards with 2 touchdowns and a pick. Michigan's losses have come on the road. The Huskies in their step-up games were defeated by 18 at home against Ohio State. Huskies' road defense has been good by allowing 1.8 yards per rush, 5.8 yards per pass attempt. Wolverines' home wins came against the down Wisconsin team, Central Michigan, and New Mexico. In conference play, the Wolverines are struggling with quarterback accuracy and pass defense. They're allowing 72% completion rate for 7.4 yards per pass attempt. Wolverines 5-9 to the spread as home favorite the past 2+ seasons. Pick here Washington +6. LSU and Vanderbilt going off here on Saturday. LSU now 5-1 after a 20-10 home victory against South Carolina. The Tigers had really good passing performance and rushed for 166 yards for 5.5 yards a carry. Defensively, they handled the pass well and allowed 193 yards rushing for 4.3 yards a carry. Garrett Nussmeier here, 20 of 33 passes for 254 yards with 2 touchdowns and 2 picks. Vanderbilt now 5-1 after a 30-14 road defeat to Alabama. Commodores were inefficient with the pass, but rushed for 135 yards for 7.1 yards per rush. Diego Pavia, 21 of 36 for 198 yards with a touchdown and a pick. He rushed for 58 yards. LSU's defense holding opponents at 3.3 yards per rush and only 5.8 yards per pass attempt. The Vanderbilt defense gave up 72% completion rate, 9 yards per pass attempt against the SEC. They have been relying heavily on the ground against the SEC and have been inefficient in the passing game. Pick here LSU +2.5. Georgia Tech and Duke for Saturday. Georgia Tech 6-0 after a 35-20 home victory to Virginia Tech. The Yellow Jackets rushed for 269 yards for 6.5 yards a carry and effective in the passing game. They allowed 361 yards to the Hokies with poor defense against the run and pass. Haynes King completed 20 of 24 passes for 213 yards with a touchdown. He rushed for 60 yards and 2 scores. Duke improved to 4-2 after a 45-21 road victory at Cal. The Blue Devils rushed for 178 yards for 4.8 yards a carry and effective in the passing game. They limited Golden Bears on the ground to 1.5 yards per rush and 245 yards passing for 7.6 yards per pass attempt. Darian Mensah here goes 22 of 30 for passing for 265 yards and 2 scores. Blue Devils dropped games at home to Illinois and at Tulane. The Yellow Jackets have a notable home win against Clemson. Georgia Tech in conference has gotten accurate quarterback play and rushed for 193 yards. They have limited conference foes to 54% completion rate. Duke has defended against the pass poorly this year, allowing 71% completions, 8.8 yards per pass attempt. Pick here Georgia Tech plus 1.5. Army and Tulane going off on Saturday. Army now 3-3 after a 24-7 home victory against Charlotte. The Black Knights rushed for 304 yards with 4.8 yards a carry with minimal passing. They held the 49ers to 2 yards a carry and defended the pass well. Cale Helms in the game, 2 of 4 passing for 50 yards. He rushed for 143 yards and 2 scores. Tulane now 5-1, a 26-19 home victory against East Carolina. Green Wave rushed for 3.9 yards a carry and effective in the passing game. They allowed 160 yards rushing to the Pirates for 3.7 yards a carry with 6 yards per pass attempt. Jake Retzloff in the game, 26 of 36 passing for 347 yards and 2 touchdowns. Army has losses at home to North Texas by 7, East Carolina by 22. Army on the road is averaging only 20 points per game as they struggle converting third downs. Defensively, they allow 7.7 yards per pass attempt. At home, the Green Wave rushed for 5.3 yards a carry and getting good quarterback play. They defended well at home, allowing 16 points per game. Pick here Tulane here at minus 9.5. UConn and Boston College going off on Saturday. Connecticut improved to 4-2 after a 51-10 home victory against FIU. The Huskies rushed for 150 yards for 4.5 yards a carry with great work in the passing game. They limited FIU in the passing department and allowed 130 yards rushing for 3.6 yards a carry. Joe Fagnano, 22 of 28 passing for 355 yards with 4 touchdowns in the game. Boston College 1-5 after a 41-10 home defeat to Clemson. BC rushed for under 3 yards a carry and were ineffective in the passing game. They allowed 504 yards to the Tigers with poor work against the run and pass. Dylan Lonergan, 12 of 19 passing for 117 yards. BC's only win came against an FCS school. This is their only FBS opponent from that is not in a major conference. UConn has road losses at Delaware and Syracuse. Connecticut on the road allowing 269 yards passing for 7 yards per pass attempt. The Eagles at home averaging 264 yards passing for 7.5 yards per pass attempt and have defended well. Pick here Boston College minus 1.5. Oklahoma and South Carolina for Saturday. Oklahoma found a 5-1 after a 24-6 neutral site defeat to Texas. The Sooners rushed for 1.6 yards a carry and were ineffective in the passing game. They allowed 3.8 yards per run to the Longhorns with 166 yards passing for 6.1 yards per pass attempt. John Mateer in the game, 20 of 38 passes for 202 yards with 3 interceptions, returning from injury. He was wearing a brace on his thumb. South Carolina drops to 3-3 after a 20-10 road defeat at LSU. The Gamecocks rushed for 193 yards for 4.5 yards a carry and were ineffective in the passing game. They allowed 166 yards rushing to the Tigers with 5.5 yards per rush, along with 7.7 yards per pass attempt. The Norris Sellers in the game, 15 of 27 passing for 124 yards with a pick. The Sooners' offense has struggled away from home, just 1.4 yards per rush and inaccurate quarterback play. South Carolina at home get accurate and efficient quarterback play. Their defense at home gives less than 3 yards a carry with 169 yards passing. No Mateer's thumb is a concern. Oklahoma 0-3 to the spread on the road as a favorite of 7 points or fewer. Gamecocks 6-4 to the spread at home against the SEC. Pick here South Carolina plus 5.5. West Virginia and UCF for Saturday. West Virginia now 2-4 after a 38-24 road win at BYU. The Mountaineers rushed for 156 yards for 3.3 yards a carry. They allowed nearly 4 yards per rush to the Cougars. They were poor defending the pass. Khalil Wilkins, 7 of 15 passing for 81 yards and 2 picks. Wilkins was forced into action with an injury to Jalen Henderson, who was doubtful. UCF now 3-3 after a 20-11 road defeat at Cincinnati. The Knights rushed for 191 yards for 4.7 yards a carry and were inefficient in the passing game. They allowed 4.3 yards per run to the Bearcats with 191 yards passing for 9.1 yards per pass attempt. Cam Fancher in the game, 28 of 49 passing for 222 yards. He rushed for 108 yards and a score. WVU quarterback situation is a concern. They've lost their past 4 road games by 7 or greater points. Their past 3 road conference games resulted in losses by 14 or greater points. Mountaineers on the road have given up 203 yards rushing and 9.1 yards per pass attempt. Their running and passing games have been poor on the highway offensively. UCF at home rushing for nearly 6 yards a carry and getting pretty good quarterback play along with defense. Pick here UCF -7. Kent State and Toledo going off on Saturday. Kent State now 2-4 after a 42-6 home victory against UMass. The Golden Flashes rushed for 151 yards for 3.6 yards a carry and efficient in the passing game. They limited the Minutemen run and pass. Drew Shields, 10 of 18 passing for 148 yards with 4 touchdowns. Toledo sits at 3-3 after a 28-23 road defeat to Bowling Green. The Rockets blew a 21-0 lead in the game. They rushed for 165 yards for 3.8 yards a carry and effective in the passing game. They limited the Falcons to under 2 yards per carry and 165 yards passing for 9.7 yards per pass attempt. Tucker Gleason, 19 of 30 passing for 264 yards with a touchdown and pick. Toledo's losses have come on the road. They have pounded teams at home. Kent State has played 3 power conference schools on the road and have been pounded. The Rockets at home rushed for 5.1 yards a carry and got really good quarterback play with outstanding defense. Kent State here, 3-12 of the spread on the road. The Rockets are 4-1 of the spread at home, facing teams that allow 4.75 yards per rush or greater. Pick here Toledo -26.5. You got Buffalo and UMass going off here on Saturday. Buffalo now 3-3 after their 31-30 home victory to Eastern Michigan. The Bulls rushed for 115 yards for 3.7 yards a carry with good movement in the passing game. They limited the Eagles through the air but allowed 227 yards rushing for 4.2 yards a carry. Quan Robertson here at 19 of 38 passing for 272 yards and 3 touchdowns. UMass 0-6 after a 42-6 road defeat at Kent State. Minutemen with poor performance in the run and pass game. They allowed 151 yards rushing to the Golden Flashes for 3.6 yards a carry and 9 yards per pass attempt. A.J. Hairston, 26 of 48 passing for 227 yards and a pick. UMass has been held for 7 or fewer points in 4 straight games. The Bulls have a road win at Kent in MAC play. The Bulls have defended the run well on the road and get an accurate quarterback play with 7.1 yards per pass attempt. UMass at home struggles on offense and allows 4.7 yards per rush along with 7 yards per pass attempt. They have failed to cover 5 of 6. The Bulls are 3-1 to the spread as the road favorite. Pick here Buffalo -17. Troy and UL Monroe going off here on action here for Saturday. Troy sits at 4-2 after a 48-41 road win at Texas State. Trojans were limited on the ground but passed well. They allowed 574 yards to the Bobcats, but poorly defending the run and pass. Tucker Kilcrease, 30 of 39 passing for 415 yards and 5 touchdowns. UL Monroe drops to 3-3 after a 23-6 road win at Coastal Carolina. The Warhawks rushed for 139 yards for 4.2 yards a carry and were ineffective in the passing game. The Chanticleers, they allowed a passing attack. They contained the Chanticleers' pass attack, but allowed 276 yards rushing for 5.5 yards per rush. Aiden Armenta, 14 of 28 passing for 176 yards with a touchdown and pick. Troy has passed effectively on the road, but defended poorly. Opponents completing 69% of their passes with 8.1 yards per pass attempt on the Trojans away from home. UL Monroe here has rushed the ball effectively here for 264 yards for 6.9 yards per rush. Troy 3-1 to the over in back-to-back road games. UL Monroe 5-0 to the over at home. Following a road defeat, pick here will be Troy and UL Monroe to go over 46.5. We got Purdue and Northwestern going off here on Saturday. Purdue drops it 2-4 after their 27-20 road defeat at Minnesota. The Boilermakers rushed for 253 yards for 6.3 yards a carry and were ineffective throwing the football. They contained the run and pass of Minnesota. Turnovers hurt the Boilermakers in the game. Ryan Brown, 21 of 40 for 203 yards with 2 interceptions. He rushed for 61 yards and a score. Northwestern 4-2, a 22-21 road win at Penn State. The Wildcats rushed for 119 yards for 2.8 yards a carry and limited in the passing game. They held the Nittany Lions to 274 yards. Preston Stone 17-26 passing for 160 yards with a touchdown. Back-to-back road games for Purdue, and that has lost 4 straight. The Boilermakers have struggled to defend the pass, allowing nearly 9 yards per pass attempt. The Wildcats have done well in defending the pass and rushing for 4.8 yards a carry. Purdue 3-7 to the spread as a road underdog. Northwestern 5-2 to the spread at home on a road game. Pick here Northwestern at -3.5. Akron and Ball State going off here on Saturday. Akron moves at 2-5 after their 20-7 home defeat to Miami, Ohio. The Zips were inefficient in the passing game and rushed for 2.3 yards a carry. They allowed 147 yards rushing for 3.5 yards a carry, along with 7.8 yards per pass attempt. Ben Finley here, 21 of 39 passing for 211 yards with a touchdown and pick. Ball State now 2-4 after a 42-0 road defeat at Western Michigan. Cardinals rushed for 20 yards and passed poorly. They gave 5 yards per rush, along with 242 yards passing for 8.3 yards per pass attempt. Kyle Kelly here, 13-22 passing for 68 yards. Now, Ball State has won both home games, including a 20-14 victory against Akron, Ohio. Akron has dropped all 3 on the road. The Zips defense on the road gave up nearly 6 yards per carry on the ground and 376 yards passing for 10.3 yards per pass attempt. The offense hasn't fared much better away from home. Ball State has defended well at home and rushing for over 6 yards a carry. Akron 2-6 to the spread on the road following a home game. Ball State 11-2 to the spread at home. Pick here Ball State -1.5. UNLV and Boise State going off here on Saturday. UNLV now 6-0 after a 51-48 victory against Air Force. The Rebels gained 603 yards effectively, and they were effective in the run and pass. But on defense, they gave up 597 yards with poor defense against the run and pass. And Anthony Calandria here, 20 of 32 passes for 361 yards with a touchdown. He rushed for 62 yards and a score. Boise State now 4-2 after a 41-25 home victory against New Mexico. The Broncos rushed for 161 yards for 3 yards a carry. They limited the Lobos to 2 yards a carry and 182 yards passing for 6 yards per pass attempt. Max Madsen in the game, 21 of 31 for 226 yards with 2 touchdowns. Boise State's 2 losses came in blowout fashion at Notre Dame and USF. UNLV, a really good offensive team, playing poorly on defense against the run and pass. The Broncos gave up 37 at Air Force and 34 at USF. The Broncos are surrendering 4.4 yards per rush. The Rebels 11-3 to the spread on the road. Pick here UNLV +12. UTSA and North Texas. This one going off on Saturday. All right, we got to UTSA now 3-3 after a 61-13 home victory against Rice. The Roadrunners rushed for 191 yards for over 5.5 yards a carry, and they had pretty good work in the passing game. They limited the Owls' passing attack and allowed 190 yards rushing for 3.8 yards a carry. Owen McCown, 15-21 passing for 236 yards with 3 touchdowns. North Texas now 5-1, a 63-36 home defeat to USF. The Mean Green were limited on the ground and moved the ball through the air. They allowed 580 yards to the Bulls and defended poorly the run and pass. Drew Messamaker here, 30-48 passing for 326 yards with 2 touchdowns and 3 picks. UTSA has failed to cover recent road games at Temple and Colorado State. The quarterback play has been poor on the road. North Texas at home rushing for nearly 5 yards a carry and getting good quarterback play. Roadrunners 3-7 to the spread on the road. The Mean Green 7-4 to the spread as home favorite. Pick here North Texas -4. Texas State and Marshall going off here on Saturday. All right, we've got Texas State dropping to 3-3 after a 48-41 home defeat to Detroit. The Bobcats gained 574 yards with effective running and passing. They limited Trojans to 1.4 yards per carry, but 415 yards passing for 10 yards per pass attempt. Brad Jackson here, 19-22 passing for 248 yards. He rushed for 77 yards and a touchdown. Marshall's now 3-3 after a 48-24 home victory against Old Dominion. The Thundering Herd rushed for 223 yards for 4.5 yards a carry and effective in the passing game. He allowed 439 yards to the Monarchs while struggling to stop the run and pass. Carlos Del Rio Wilson, 17-24 passing for 219 yards and 2 touchdowns. He rushed for 95 yards and 2 scores. Texas State in conference has put up 36 points per game behind 6.2 yards per rush and great play at the quarterback position. But the Bobcats defensively allowing 40 points per game in conference as they are allowing 332 yards passing for 8.7 yards per pass attempt. Marshall's offense has been explosive in conference with struggles in both the pass and run defense. Thundering Herd 7-2 to the over at home against the conference. Pick here will be Texas State and Marshall to go over 65. All right, we got Temple and Charlotte going off here on Saturday. Temple fell to 3-3 after their 32-31 home defeats at Navy. The Owls gained 528 yards. A really good performance in the run and pass. Evan Simon, 25-36 passing for 345 yards with a touchdown. He rushed for 20 yards and a score. Charlotte drops to 1-5, a 24-7 road defeat to Army. The 49ers rushed for 2.3 yards a carry and poor in the passing game. They limited the Black Knights on the ground, but allowed 304 yards rushing for 4.8 yards a carry. Zach Wilkie here, 8-14 passing for 42 yards. Charlotte has no wins against FBS schools. All losses have been by 11 points or greater. But Temple on defense on the road give up nearly 8 yards per carry and 66% completion rate. 49ers are getting good work from their quarterbacks at home. Owls 1-7 the spread on the road in conference. Pick here Charlotte, plus 12.5. Ole Miss and Georgia going off on Saturday. Ole Miss now 6-0 after their 24-21 home victory against Washington State. The Rebels rushed for 186 yards for 4.5 yards a carry and efficient in the passing game. They allowed 127 yards rushing to the Cougars for 4.5 yards a carry and 7 yards per pass attempt. Austin Simmons dealing with an ankle injury and questionable. Trinidad Chambliss here, 20-29 passing for 253 yards with 2 touchdowns and had a rushing score. Georgia now 5-1 after a 20-10 road win at Auburn. The Bulldogs were limited on the ground and through the air. They defended the pass well and allowed 140 yards rushing for 3.9 yards a carry. Gunnar Stockton here, 24-37 passing for 217 yards. He rushed for 26 yards and a score. The Bulldogs have a home loss to Alabama. Ole Miss has a notable home win against LSU. Ole Miss on the road rushing for 4.5 yards a carry and passing for 10 yards per pass attempt. They have defended the pass well away from home. Georgia 4-12 the spread at home. Pick here Ole Miss plus 7.5. Ohio State and Wisconsin going off on Saturday. Ohio State now 6-0 after a 34-16 road win at Illinois. The Buckeyes were limited on the ground and through the air. They held the Fighting Illini to under 2 yards per rush with 248 yards passing for 5.6 yards per carry, per pass attempt, I should say. Julian Sayin here, 19-27 passes for 166 yards and 2 touchdowns. Wisconsin drops to 2-4 after a 37-0 home defeat to Iowa. The Badgers passed poorly and rushed for 127 yards for 3.5 yards a carry. They contained the Hawkeyes' passing game, but allowed 210 yards rushing for nearly 6 yards a carry. Hunter Simmons here, 8-21 passes for 82 yards and 2 interceptions. Quarterback Billy Edwards sidelined with that knee injury. 4 straight losses for Wisconsin, all by 14 or greater points. Their only victories came against small conference schools. Iowa State has covered all 4 against the Big Ten, were favored by 9.5 or greater in those games. Their 3 conference wins have come by 18 or greater points. The Buckeyes offense rushed for just over 3.5 yards a carry and averaging only 6.8 yards per pass attempt here. On the road, the Badgers defense at home allowing 2.5 yards per run, 5.8 yards per pass attempt. It is a back-to-back road trip for the Buckeyes, and they do play their 3rd road game in 4 weeks. We'll take Wisconsin here plus the 26. Texas A&M and Arkansas going off here on Saturday. Texas A&M now 6-0 after a 34-17 home victory against Florida. The Aggies rushed for 183 yards for 4.3 yards a carry and effective in the passing game. They held the Gators to 3 yards per rush and 245 yards passed for 6.6 yards per pass attempt. Marcel Reed completed 16 of 26 passes for 234 yards with a touchdown and pick. He rushed for 37 yards and a score. Arkansas drops to 2-4 after their 34-31 road defeat at Tennessee. The Razorbacks gained 497 yards and effective in the running game plus pass. They allowed 264 yards rushing to the Volunteers for 6.6 yards a carry, 8.8 yards per pass attempt. Kalen Green, 21 of 31 passing for 256 yards, 2 touchdowns. He rushed for 63 yards and a score. It is 4 straight losses for the Aggies, and they fired, of course, their head coach a few weeks ago. Their offense has kept them in games. I'm sorry. 4 straight losses for the Razorbacks, and they fired their head coach a few weeks ago. The Arkansas Razorbacks fired their coach. Their offense has kept them in games, though. That's Arkansas. In their only road game, it was a 41-40 win at Notre Dame for Texas A&M. The pass defense was poor by the Aggies in that road game, allowing 293 yards for 9.2 yards per pass attempt. Arkansas at home rushed for 6.5 yards a carry and getting great quarterback play. Their defense has been poor on the road by allowing nearly 5 yards per rush, 251 yards passing for 8.2 yards per pass attempt. Texas A&M 8-1 the over on the road. The Razorbacks 4-1 the over at home on a road game. Pick here will be on Texas A&M and Arkansas over 61.5. Coastal Carolina and App State going off here on Saturday. Coastal Carolina now 3-3 after their 23-8 home victory against UL Monroe. The Chanticleers threw poorly but rushed for 276 yards for 5.5 yards a carry. Samari Collier, he was called into action due to injuries. He goes 5 of 15 for 37 yards and a touchdown. He rushed for 86 yards and a score. He entered the game as a 3rd string and catapulted to QB2 and expected to start here if the players do not return from injury. App State sits at 4-2, a 41-20 road win at Georgia State. Mountaineers rushed for 124 yards for 3.5 yards a carry and effective in the passing game. They limited the Panthers on the ground and allowed 303 yards passing, but only 4.9 yards per pass attempt. J.J. Cole, 21 of 32 passing for 309 yards and 4 touchdowns. Possible 3rd string for Coastal Carolina in this road spot of concern. Really, the Chanticleers' road losses came in blowout fashion. Their defense on the road gave up nearly 5.5 yards per rush and 7.6 yards per pass attempt, and of course allowing 38 points a game away from home. App State at home rushed for 172 yards per game with 5 yards a carry, and they're stopping the run on defense. Coastal Carolina 1-4 the spread on the road, following a home win. Pick here will be App State minus 10.5. Wyoming and Air Force for Saturday. Wyoming now 3-3 after their 35-28 home victory against San Jose State. The Cowboys rushed for 4.2 yards a carry and were effective in the passing game. They limited the Spartans on the ground but gave up 340 yards passing for 6 yards per pass attempt. Caden Anderson, 23 of 39 passes for 304 yards with 2 touchdowns but 2 picks. Air Force 1-5 with their 51-48 road defeat at UNLV. The Falcons were effective in the run and passing game, but they allowed 597 yards to Rebels by poorly defending the run and pass. Liam Sharska here, 10 of 17 passes for 175 yards with a touchdown. He rushed for 136 yards and 2 scores. The Air Force has lost 4 straight. They've gone over in every game with poor defense against FBS teams. The Falcons were allowing 5.7 yards per rush, 10.8 yards per pass attempt. On defense, they rushed for 5.5 yards a carry with 12.5 yards per pass attempt. The Cowboys, in their past 4 games, have allowed an average of 32 points per game. They are 3-1 the over on the road against losing teams. The pick here, Wyoming and Air Force over 58.5. SMU and Clemson going off here on Saturday. SMU now 4-2 after their 34-10 home victory against Stanford. Mustangs rushed for 122 yards for 5.1 yards a carry and effective in the passing game. They limited the Cardinal on the ground and allowed 278 yards passing for 6.8 yards per pass attempt. Kevin Jennings, 22 of 30 passing for 247 yards with 2 touchdowns. Clemson now 3-3 after a 41-10 road win at Boston College. The Tigers gained 504 yards with success in the run and pass. They limit BC in their run and passing game. Cade Klubnik here, 22 of 30 passing for 280 yards with a touchdown and pick. He rushed for 48 yards and a score. Clemson got healthy against 2 of the worst ACC teams. The Mustangs offensively on the road, completing 65% of their passes for 7.7 yards per pass attempt. The Tigers at home have struggled on offense, getting points on the board. They have a home loss to Syracuse where they allowed 34 points and 278 yards passing. Clemson 1-5 to the spread at home, facing teams with a 600 to 750 win percentage. Pick your SMU plus the 10. Northern Illinois and Ohio, this one for Saturday. Northern Illinois fell to 1-5 after a 16-10 road defeat at Eastern Michigan. The Huskies were poor in the passing game and rushed for 216 yards for 5.5 yards per carry. They limited the Eagles through the air and allowed 149 yards rushing for 3.9 yards a carry. Brady Davidson here, 11 of 26 passing for 94 yards and a pick. Ohio 3-3 after their 20-14 road win at Ball State. The Bobcats rushed for 168 yards for 5.1 yards a carry. Defensively, they limited the Cardinals' passing game and allowed 172 yards rushing for 4.1 yards per rush. Parker Navarro here, 16 of 29 passing for 108 yards and a touchdown. He rushed for 77 yards in the game. NIU against the conference, holding teams to 12 points per game with great pass defense. They rushed for 5.3 yards a carry against the MAC. Ohio against the MAC is allowing 176 yards rushing per game for 4.5 yards a carry. The Huskies 6-3 of the spread as the road underdog. Pick here Northern Illinois plus 11. Michigan State and Indiana going off on Saturday. Michigan State drops to 3-3 after their 38-13 home defeat to UCLA. The Spartans struggled here in both run and pass. They allowed 238 yards rushing to the Bruins for 5.5 yards a carry, along with 7.5 yards per pass attempt. Alessio Milicevic in relief, it went 8 of 18 passing for 100 yards and a touchdown. He may go with the injury to their starter. Indiana now 6-0 after a 30-20 road win at Oregon. The Hoosiers rushed for 111 yards for 3 yards a carry and defended the Ducks well against the run and pass. Fernando Mendoza, 20 of 31 passing for 215 yards with a touchdown and pick. Quarterback injury for Spartans a concern. Michigan State on the road rushing for 2.8 yards a carry and barely completing half their passes. Their defense has been poor on the road by allowing 41 points per game with 5 yards per rush and 72% completion rate. The Hoosiers pounded Illinois in their Big Ten home game, putting up 63 points. They are 7-3 to the spread at home in conference play. Pick here Indiana minus 27. Old Dominion and James Madison for Saturday. Old Dominion fell to 4-2 after their 48-28 road defeat to Marshall. The Monarchs were successful running and throwing the football. Defensively, they allowed 223 yards rushing to the Thundering Herd for 4.5 yards a carry and struggled defending the passing game. Colton Joseph here, 15-28 passing for 266 yards with a touchdown and 2 picks. He rushed for 50 yards and a score. James Madison 5-1 after their 24-14 home victory against Louisiana. The Dukes rushed for 187 yards for 4.6 yards a carry and effective in the passing game. They limit the Raging Cajuns to under 2 yards per rush with 243 passing yards for 8.5 yards per pass attempt. Alonzo Barnett here, 26 of 40 passing for 209 yards with 3 touchdowns and a pick. Only loss for JMU came at Louisville by 14. ODU does have an opening week loss in Indiana. Their defense on the road allowing 5 yards a carry and 7 yards per pass attempt, along with 34 points per game. The Dukes at home rushing for 6.2 yards a carry with great defense against the run and pass. Pick here, James Madison here at a pickup. Memphis and UAB going off here on Saturday. Memphis improved to 6-0 after their 45-7 home victory against Tulsa. Tigers rushed for 191 yards for 4 yards a carry and were effective in the passing game. They defended the run and pass of the Golden Hurricane well. Brendan Lewis here, 22 of 30 passes for 266 yards with 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. He rushed for 67 yards and a touchdown. UAB fell to 2-4 with their 53-33 road win at FAU. The Blazers were limited on the ground and moved the football through the air. They allowed 492 yards to FAU, struggling to stop the run and pass. Jalen Kitna, 29 of 41 passes for 261 yards and a touchdown. Trent Dilfer was fired by UAB following the loss. Their 3 straight defeats for UAB, all by 18 or greater points. Memphis has pounded their non-power conference opponents. The Blazers against the AAC allowing 41 points per game with 4.8 yards per run and 13 yards per pass attempt. Memphis against the conference putting up 50 points per game with strong numbers in the passing game and running as well. Delivering on defense there. Strong numbers. Tigers 3-1 the spread on the road, facing teams that allow 425 yards per game or greater. UAB 2-5 the spread as a home dog. The pick here, Memphis minus 21.5. Texas Tech and Arizona State for Saturday. Texas Tech now 6-0 after their 42-17 home victory against Kansas. The Red Raiders rushed for 372 yards for 9.3 yards a carry and were inefficient in the passing game. They limited the Jayhawks to 1.3 yards per rush with 272 passing yards for 7 yards per pass attempt. Baron Morton goes 7-12 passing for 91 yards with a touchdown. He is day-to-day with a leg injury. Arizona State 4-2 after their 42-10 road defeats at Utah. Sun Devils rushed for 135 yards for 3.5 yards a carry and were poor in the passing game. They allowed 412 yards to the Utes. Of course, the Sam Levitt missed the Utah game, and news was positive about him returning to the game to Sunday here in this one. Actually, the 412 yards, it's a lot there to get for the Utes there. It was really poor work in the run and pass. Now, we're looking here at Arizona State. Their losses came at Utah and at Mississippi State. They have a 3-point home win against TCU. But the Red Raiders blew out Houston and Utah on the road. The Red Raiders on the ground rushing for 4.4 yards a carry and 71% completion rate for 8.7 yards per pass attempt. They have defended well on the road as they're allowing 10.5 points a game. The Red Raiders 8-3 the spread on the road in conference play. Pick here Texas Tech minus 7.5. That's what should be the game right there. Good. Mississippi State and Florida going off here on Saturday. All right, Mississippi State fell to 4-2 after a 31-9 road defeat at Texas A&M. The Bulldogs rushed for 77 yards for 2.5 yards a carry and were ineffective in the passing game. They allowed 479 yards to the Aggies with poor work against the run and pass. Blake Shapen here, 15-20 passing for 142 yards with a touchdown and pick. Florida is 2-4 after their 34-17 road defeat at Texas A&M. The Gators rushed for 3 yards a carry and had movement in the passing game. They allowed 183 yards rushing to the Aggies for 4.4 yards a carry, along with 9 yards per pass attempt. DJ Lagway in the game, 21-37 passing for 245 yards and 2 touchdowns. Mississippi State in conference is getting accurate quarterback play. Florida in the SEC has struggled on the ground and with their pass defense allowing 8.8 yards per pass attempt. Florida 2-4 the spread as home favorite. Pick here will be Mississippi State plus 9.5. Southern Miss and Louisiana going off here on Thursday. Southern Miss now 4-2 after their 38-35 road win at Georgia Southern. The Golden Eagles rushed for 184 yards for 3.8 yards a carry and effective in the passing game. They limited the Eagles on the ground but allowed 313 yards passing for 7.3 yards per pass attempt. Brandon Baxton here, 19-28 passing for 237 yards with 2 touchdowns. Louisiana 2-4 after their 24-14 road defeat at James Madison. The Raging Cajuns rushed for 1.5 yards a carry and were able to move the ball through the air. They allowed 187 yards rushing to the Dukes for 4.5 yards a carry and 7.3 yards per pass attempt. Lunch Winfield here, 14-28 passing for 243 yards with 2 touchdowns and a pick. Louisiana has a 3-point home win to Marshall and a 2-point home loss at Rice. Southern Miss has 10-point road loss at Louisiana Tech. The Golden Eagles defense in conference on the road allowing 35 points per game with 313 yards passing for 7.3 yards per pass attempt. Raging Cajuns had a good offensive performance in their conference home game. Southern Miss 3-10 to the spread on the road. Louisiana 5-1 to the spread at home upon a loss. Pick here will be Louisiana plus 3.5. Oregon and Rutgers going off here on Saturday. Oregon fell to 5-1 with their 30-20 home defeat to Indiana. The Ducks were held to 2.7 yards per rush and limited in the passing game. They held the Hoosiers to 3 yards per rush with 215 passing yards for 6.9 yards per pass attempt. Dante Moore here, 21-34 passing for 186 yards with a touchdown and a pick. Rutgers drops at 3-3 after a 38-19 road defeat at Washington. The Scarlet Knights rushed for 4 yards a carry and moved the ball through the air. They allowed 5.5 yards per rush to the Huskies with 402 yards passing for 14.9 yards per pass attempt. Ethan Kalkmanis, 31-15 passing for 386 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. The Ducks on the road here rushing for over 5 yards a carry and 74% completion rate. They have allowed 53% completion rate away from home. The Rutgers have defended poorly at home, giving up 5.1 yards a carry and 8.2 yards per pass attempt. Oregon's speed may be too much here, and Rutgers' defense has really looked bad. Oregon here 8-3 to the spread on the road. Rutgers 3-7 to the spread against the Big Ten at home. Pick here Oregon minus 17. Washington State and Virginia going off here on Saturday. Washington State fell to 3-3 after their 24-21 road defeat at Ole Miss. The Cougars were able to move the ball through the air and rush for 127 yards for 4.5 yards a carry. They allowed 4.5 yards per rush with 253 passing yards for 8.7 yards per pass attempt. Zevi Ekos here, 24-31 passing for 218 yards with 2 touchdowns. Virginia now 5-1 after a 30-27 road victory at Louisville. The Cavs rushed for 88 yards for 2.8 yards a carry and were limited in the passing game. They held the Cardinals to 2 yards per rush with 329 passing yards for 6.9 yards per pass attempt. Chandler Morris here, 19-31 passing for 149 yards with a touchdown. The Cavs have gone over in 5 of 6. They've really changed more of an offense to more of an up-tempo, including more passing. Washington State on the road allowing 75% completion rates, 7.6 yards per pass attempt. Virginia at home averaging 49 points per game with 5.4 yards per rush, 306 yards passing per game. The Cougars 5-3 to the over on the road, facing a team that averages 4.75 yards per carry. The pick here, Washington State and Virginia over 56.5. Hawaii and Colorado State going off here on Saturday. Hawaii now 5-2 after a 44-26 home victory against Utah State. The Warriors rushed for 133 yards for 4.5 yards a carry and great performance in the passing game. They allowed 435 yards to the Aggies with poor work defensively against the run and pass. Micah Alejado, 34-54 passing for 413 yards with 3 touchdowns and a pick. He had a rushing score. Colorado State now 2-4 after a 49-21 home victory against Fresno State. The Rams were efficient in the passing game and rushed for 190 yards for 5.5 yards per carry. On defense, they contained the Bulldogs' run attack and allowed 350 yards passing for 7.1 yards per pass attempt. Jackson Brousseau, 12-18 passing for 144 yards and 3 touchdowns. Hawaii in their road games are allowing 38 points per game with 6.1 yards per run and 12.2 yards per pass attempt. They have thrown the ball though for 340 yards per game on the highway. The Rams in the Mountain West play, putting up 37 points and running for nearly 5 yards a carry, but their defense against the conference gave up 33 points a game, over 5 yards a carry, and 9.1 yards per pass attempt. Warriors 6-2 the over on the road in conference. Pick here Hawaii and Colorado State to go over 52.5. Georgia State and Georgia Southern. This one going off on Saturday. Georgia State's 1-5 after a 41-20 home defeat to App State. The Panthers rushed for 2.5 yards a carry and were inefficient in the passing game. They allowed 3.5 yards per rush to the Mountaineers, with 311 yards passing for 8.2 yards per pass attempt. TJ Finley in the game, 13-26 passes for 91 yards with a pick. Georgia Southern drops to 2-4 after a 38-35 home defeat to Southern Miss. The Panthers were stymied on the ground but effective in the passing game. They allowed 3.8 yards a carry with 237 yards passing for 8.5 yards per pass attempt. J.C. French in the game, 24 of 43 passing for 313 yards with 2 touchdowns and 3 picks. Georgia Southern has gone over in 6 of 7. Georgia State on the road is allowing 7.3 yards per rush with 375 yards passing for 10.5 yards per pass attempt. The Eagles are putting up 40 points per game at home with 271 yards passing per game, 8 yards per pass attempt. They're giving up 30 points per game at home. Head-to-head, they've gone over in 4 of 5. Pick here, Georgia State and Georgia Southern over 59. Texas and Kentucky for Saturday. Texas now 4-2 after a 23-6 home victory against Oklahoma. The Longhorns rushed for 136 yards for 4 yards to carry, but came up short in the passing game. They limited the Sooners on the ground and allowed 210 yards passing for 5.5 yards per pass attempt. Arch Manning here completed 21-27 for 166 yards with a touchdown. Kentucky moved to 2-3 after their 35-14 road defeat to Georgia. The Wildcats rushed for 2 yards a carry and ineffective in the passing game. They gave up 4.1 yards per rush to the Bulldogs with 245 yards passing for 9.1 yards per pass attempt. Cutter Boley in the game, 25 of 41 passing for 225 yards with 2 touchdowns and a pick. Kentucky was competitive at home to Ole Miss with a loss by 7 and a cover. Texas dropped both true road games. They have struggled on the ground and with quarterback accuracy away from home. The Wildcats at home rushed for 5 yards a carry and defended the run well. Texas 7-9 the spread as road favorite. Pick here Kentucky plus 12.5. Penn State and Iowa going off here on Saturday. Penn State 3-3 after a 22-21 home defeat to Northwestern. The Nittany Lions rushed for 4.5 yards a carry and were limited in the passing game. They held the Wildcats at 2.8 yards per rush with 163 yards passing for 6.3 yards per pass attempt. Drew Allar is out for the year with an injury. Ethan Guckenmeyer, 11 passes this year in relief. He threw 2 passes last year. The Redford freshman did. Iowa improved to 4-2 with a 37-0 road win at Wisconsin. The Hawkeyes were limited in the passing game and rushed for 210 yards for nearly 6 yards a carry. They held the Badgers to 82 passing yards with 3.5 yards per carry. Mark Gronkowski, 17-24 passes for 107 yards and a pick. Head coach for Penn State obviously fired. They go with an interim here. Quarterback situation is a concern for the Lions. In their lone road game, they were beaten up by UCLA, gave 42 points and 280 yards rushing. Iowa is running the football effectively at home and defending the run and pass. Penn State 3-6 for the spread on the road against winning teams. Iowa 5-1 the spread at home following a road game. Pick here Iowa -3. For Saturday, Maryland fell to 4-2 after their 34-31 home defeat to Nebraska. The Terrapins moved the football through the air and rushed for 130 yards for 4.3 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 453 yards to the Cornhuskers with poor work defending the run and pass. Malik Washington in the game, 27-37 passing for 249 yards with a touchdown. UCLA now 2-4 after a 38-13 road win at Michigan State. The Bruins were effective through the air and rushed for 238 yards for 5.5 yards a carry. They limited the Spartans' run and pass game. Nico Imaleva, 16-24 passing for 180 yards and 3 touchdowns. 2 straight victories for the Bruins under the coaching change here. The Terrapins have dropped 2 straight. UCLA in conference running for over 5 yards a carry and getting accurate quarterback play. They have defended the pass well against the Big Ten. Maryland has put up poor numbers against the conference offensively. On defense against the Big Ten, they are giving up 67% completion rate, 7.3 yards per pass attempt. Pick here will be UCLA at -3. Pittsburgh and Syracuse going off on Saturday. Pittsburgh now 4-2 after a 34-31 road win at Florida State. The Panthers were strong in the passing game and rushed for 155 yards for 3.7 yards a carry. Defensively, they allowed 4.3 yards a carry to the Seminoles with 245 passing yards for 10.6 yards per pass attempt. Mason Hanchell completed 21 of 29 passing for 321 yards, 2 touchdowns and 2 picks. He rushed for 64 yards. Syracuse now 3-3 after a 31-18 road defeat at SMU. The Orange were inefficient in the passing game and rushed for 110 yards for 3.3 yards a carry. They limited the Mustangs' ground attack but allowed 294 yards passing for 8.2 yards per pass attempt. Ricky Collins here, 22 of 45 passing for 279 yards with a touchdown and 3 picks. He rushed for 57 yards and a score. Losing starter Angeli at quarterback, a big blow for Syracuse as they've lost 2 straight. It is back-to-back road games for the Panthers here. They have seen a scoring increase with the quarterback switch. Pittsburgh on the road throwing for 312 yards with 9.3 yards per pass attempt. Defensively, they're allowing 69% completion rate for 9.2 yards per pass attempt on the highway. There was some improvement in the passing game for the Orange last week since the injury to Angeli. Defensively in conference, Orange allowing 5.3 yards per rush, 308 yards passing for 71% completion rate. Panthers 6-3 to the over on the road against the ACC. Pick here will be Pittsburgh and Syracuse over at 54.5. FAU and South Florida going off here on Saturday. We've got FAU now 3-3 after their 53-33 home victory against UAB. The Owls put up 492 yards with effective running and passing. They limited the Blazers at 2.4 yards per rush with 261 yards passing for 6.4 yards per pass attempt. Caden Belkamp in the game, 20 of 30 passing for 297 yards with 3 touchdowns and a pick. USF a mark of 5-1 after a 63-36 road win at North Texas. The Bulls gained 580 yards with solid running and passing. They limited the Mean Green on the ground and allowed 326 yards passing for 6.7 yards per pass attempt. Byron Brown here, 22 of 28 passing for 245 yards with 3 touchdowns and a pick. He rushed for 82 yards and 2 scores. USF has played bad defensive teams the past 3 games, which has inflated their numbers. FAU has won 2 straight. In conference, they're throwing for 319 yards per game with 8.3 yards per pass attempt. Pick here will be FAU plus 21.5. USC and Notre Dame going off here on Saturday. USC now 5-1 after a 31-13 home victory against Michigan. The Trojans gained 489 yards with good work in the run and pass. They limited the Wolverines' ground attack and allowed 207 yards rushing for 8 yards per pass attempt. Jane Mavia, 25 of 32 passing for 265 yards with 2 scores and a pick. Notre Dame now 4-2 after a 36-7 home victory against NC State. The Fighting Irish rushed for 143 yards for 3.7 yards a carry with excellent work in the passing game. They held the Wolfpack to 1.5 yards per rush with 182 yards passing for 5.9 yards per pass attempt. C.J. Carr in the game, 19 of 31 passing for 342 yards with 2 touchdowns and a pick. USC's rushing for 4.2 yards a carry on the road with 323 yards passing for 9.1 yards per pass attempt. They have contained the run well away from home. Notre Dame at home allowing 265 yards passing per game for 7.4 yards per pass attempt. The Trojans 4-1 to the spread as a road dog. Pick here USC plus 9.5. Tennessee and Alabama going off on Saturday. Tennessee now 5-1 after a 34-31 home victory against Arkansas. The Volunteers gained 485 yards with strong gains in the run and pass. They allowed 496 yards to the Razorbacks with poor work at stopping the run and pass. Joey Aguilar here, 16-25 passing for 221 yards with a touchdown. Alabama now 5-1 after a 27-24 road win at Missouri. The Crimson Tide were limited on the ground and moved the football through the air. They contained the Tigers through the air and allowed 163 yards rushing for 5.8 yards per rush. Ty Simpson in the game, 23-31 passing for 200 yards with 3 touchdowns. Tennessee plays their second road game. They beat Mississippi State on the road by 7. They contained the run and pass wall in that one. Alabama in conference rushed for 3.3 yards a carry and allowing 175 rushing for 6.6 yards per rush. Pick here, Tennessee plus 8.5. Missouri and Auburn going off on Saturday. We got Missouri 5-1 after a 27-24 home defeat to Alabama. The Tigers rushed for 163 yards for 5.8 yards a carry. They limited the Crimson Tide to 2.8 yards per rush with 200 yards passing for 6.5 yards per pass attempt. Bo Burbillo, 16-28 passing for 167 yards with 2 touchdowns and 2 picks. He rushed for 61 yards and a score. Auburn, they dropped to 3-3 after a 20-10 home defeat to Georgia. The Tigers were inefficient in the passing game and rushed for 140 yards for 3.9 yards a carry. They held the Bulldogs at 291 yards, defending the run and pass pretty well. Jackson Arnold, 19-31 passing, just 137 yards. He rushed for 55 yards and a score. Auburn has struggled offensively against the SEC, just 2.7 yards per rush, 5 yards per pass attempt. Their defense in conference allowing 66% completion rate for 7.2 yards per pass attempt. Missouri offensively in the SEC rushing for nearly 6 yards a carry and defending the run well. The Missouri Tigers are putting up more points against the conference here than Auburn. Missouri 6-0 to the spread as road favorite. Pick here, Missouri minus 1.5. Cincinnati and Oklahoma State going off on Saturday. We got Cincinnati now 5-1 after a 20-11 home victory against UCF. The Bearcats rushed for 115 yards for 4.2 yards a carry and efficient in the passing game. They allowed 191 yards rushing to the Knights for 4.7 yards per rush, allowed 4.5 yards per pass attempt. Brendan Sorsby here, 12-21 passes for 191 yards and 2 touchdowns. Oklahoma State here, they fell to 1-5 with a 39-17 home defeat to Houston. The Cowboys rushed here for 45 yards and were efficient in the passing game. That allowed 485 yards to the Cougars with poor defense against the run and pass. Ole Miss State performing very poorly on offense and defense against the Big 12. Could be the worst team of the power conferences of all power conference schools. They're allowing 42 points per game against the conference. The Bearcats against the Big 12 rushing for 6 yards a carry with 8.9 yards per pass attempt. Dating back to last year, Oklahoma State has failed to cover 9 of 10. Pick here, Cincinnati minus 21.5. Utah and BYU going off on Saturday. Utah now 5-1 after a 42-10 home victory against Arizona State. The Utes gained 412 yards with good work in the run and pass. They limited the Sun Devils' passing attack, plus allowed 135 yards rushing for 3.5 yards per carry. Devin Dampier here, 7 of 12 passing for 140 yards. He rushed for 120 yards and 3 scores. BYU 6-0 after a 33-27 road victory at Arizona in overtime. The Cougars rushed for 258 yards for 5.1 yards a carry. They allowed 164 yards rushing to the Wildcats for 4.8 yards a carry, but only 4.8 yards per pass attempt. Bear Bachmeier here, 12 of 29 passing for 172 yards with a touchdown and 2 picks. He rushed for 89 yards and 2 scores. BYU hitting all the data points on offense and defense. They are rushing for 5.7 yards a carry and holding teams to 5.5 yards per pass attempt. Utah, they do have a 24-point home loss at Texas Tech. The Cougars won the meeting last year on the road. Utah 0-3 to the spread on the road, facing a team that allows 3.25 yards per rush or fewer. The Cougars 4-1 to the spread as a home dog. Pick here, BYU plus 3.5. Nevada and New Mexico going off on Saturday. Nevada 1-5 after a 44-10 home defeat to San Diego State. The Wolfpack were inefficient in the passing game and rushed for 2.5 yards a carry. They allowed 409 yards to the Aztecs with poor work against the run and pass. Carter Jones in the game, 16-32 passing for 177 yards with a touchdown and 2 picks. New Mexico drops to 3-3 with their 41-25 road defeat to Boise State. The Lobos were held at 2 yards per rush. They allowed 3 yards per run to the Broncos with 236 yards passing for 7.4 yards per pass attempt. Jack Lane in the game at 7-17 for 115 yards with a touchdown and 2 picks. You know, Nevada has struggled to get points on the road here. They are getting poor quarterback play away from home, and defensively are giving up 73% completions. New Mexico at home put up 35 points per game and get efficient quarterback play. They have defended the run well at home, allowing just 2.5 yards per rush. Wolfpack 1-4 the spread. We'll take New Mexico here, laying the 12.5. Florida State and Stanford going off here on Saturday. All right, we've got Florida State now 3-3 after a 34-31 home defeat to Pittsburgh. The Seminoles were efficient in the passing game and rushed for 170 yards for 4.3 yards a carry. They allowed 476 yards to the Panthers with 321 yards passing for 11 yards per pass attempt. Tommy Castellanos here, 16-23 passing for 245 yards with 3 scores. Stanford drops at 2-4, a 34-10 road defeat to SMU. The Cardinals moved the ball through the air and rushed for 3.3 yards a carry. They allowed 369 yards to the Mustangs by poorly defending the run and pass. Bengo Bronson here, 22-40 passing for 278 yards with a touchdown and pick. Stanford won both home games. They are getting great work at quarterback, 315 yards passing, 9.7 yards per pass attempt. The Cardinals and home holding teams at 3.3 yards per rush. Florida State in their lone road game, while they have 46 at Virginia with 444 yards allowed. FSU 3-7 the spread on the road. Pick here Stanford plus 18. For more free pick videos, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Lots of free picks on our channel from myself and our team of cappers here at Tony'sPicks.com, making it a great channel to subscribe to. Hit us up with that like, that thumbs up. We greatly appreciate it. Then visit our site, Tony'sPicks.com, for our best bets. Our premium plays are there with best bets and more will be locked and loaded here for this card on Friday. And, of course, our promo code TonyT at checkout will knock off that 15%. The link's in the description to get signed up. That's going to do it for now. I'm Tony T. We'll talk to you guys later.